Typhoon of Steel, a turning point in the Pacific War. Overview of World War II in the Pacific and the significance of Iwo Jima. World War II in the Pacific started when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, prompting the U.S. to enter the war. Japan initially made rapid territorial gains, but the tide turned with the U.S. victory at Midway in June 1942. Fierce battles followed, including Guadalcanal. The war ended with Japan's surrender on September 2, 1945, after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Battle of Iwo Jima fought from February 19th to March 26, 1945. This was a pivotal engagement in the Pacific theater of World War II. U.S. Marines aimed to capture the island's airfields to facilitate operations against Japan. The battle was fiercely contested, resulting in significant casualties on both sides. The iconic photograph of Marines raising the U.S. flag on Mount Suribachi became a symbol of American perseverance. The capture of Iwo Jima provided the U.S. with a strategic base for fighter escorts and emergency landings for bombers, contributing to the intensification of air raids on Japan. And there is also a quote from after the battle from Admiral Nimitz, and it reads, "Among the men who fought on Iwo Jima, uncommon valor was a common virtue." Admiral Nimitz said this to honor the extraordinary bravery and sacrifice of the U.S. Marines and Navy personnel who fought in one of the bloodiest battles of World War II. The battle, which lasted from February 19th to March 26, 1945, was crucial in securing a strategic airfield for the U.S. and demonstrating the extreme resilience of both American and Japanese forces. Nimitz's words became a lasting tribute to the heroism displayed during the conflict. This slide shows some background to the Battle of Iwo Jima, the location and strategic importance. It was a volcanic island between Japan and the Mariana Islands. And Iwo Jima is a small volcanic island in the Pacific Ocean, part of the Ogasawara Islands of Japan. It is about 750 miles south of Tokyo and 760 miles north of Guam. The island is roughly 8 square miles in size and is dominated by Mount Suribachi, a dormant volcano at its southwestern point. There is still a small Japanese military presence on the island to this day. It was strategically important for the airfields that the U.S. wanted to use to bomb Japan. The island sat approximately halfway between Japan and the U.S.-controlled Mariana Islands, making it a vital strategic point for both American and Japanese forces. For the United States, capturing Iwo Jima had several key advantages. Airfield for bombing raids. The island had 3 airfields that could serve as emergency landing sites for B-29 bombers flying between Marianas and Japan, as well as fighter escort bases. It allowed U.S. P-51 Mustang fighters to escort bombers on missions to mainland Japan. It was also a key point in neutralizing Japanese defenses. The island was used as a base for Japan's fighter aircraft, which intercepted American bombers en route to Japan. Taking Iwo Jima eliminated this threat. It would also provide a psychological and tactical victory. It demonstrated American dominance in the Pacific and set the stage for the invasion of Okinawa. And for the Japanese, Iwo Jima was a critical defensive outpost. They heavily fortified the island with underground tunnels, bunkers, and artillery to slow the American advance towards Japan. Their fierce resistance on Iwo Jima foreshadowed the even deadlier battle to come in the Pacific. On to Japanese defensive strategies and General Tadamichi's fortified positions. The Japanese defense strategy at Iwo Jima was meticulously planned under the command of General Tadamichi. Instead of relying on traditional beach defenses, Tadamichi adopted a deep, fortified, and attritional defense to maximize American casualties. Some key aspects of the defenses were extensive tunnel networks. Over 11 miles of tunnels connected bunkers, artillery positions, and underground barracks. This allowed Japanese forces to move unseen and continue fighting even under heavy bombardment. There were no traditional beach defenses. Unlike previous island battles, they would opt to avoid massing troops on the beaches, knowing that U.S. naval and aerial bombardment would devastate them. Instead, he focused on island strongholds, as well as well-camouflaged defensive positions. Concrete bunkers, pillboxes, and artillery positions were hidden in caves and reinforced to withstand direct hits. Interlocking fields of fire, machine guns, mortars, and artillery were positioned to create overlapping zones of fire, making it difficult for U.S. forces to advance without suffering heavy casualties. Also, unlike previous battles where mass infantry assault were common, the troops were ordered to fight to the death from defensive positions to maximize U.S. losses. The volcano at the island's southwest tip became a fortified stronghold with artillery and machine gun nests raining fire on the U.S. troops. To go more in depth on Japanese defenses, there was 22,000 Japanese troops under General Kurebayashi, extensive tunnels, bunkers, and underground artillery, no traditional banzai charges defensive warfare. The 22,000 Japanese troops stationed on Iwo Jima under General Tadamichi were a mix of elite and standard infantry units, naval personnel, and support troops, unlike previous battles in the Pacific, where Japanese forces relied on aggressive banzai charges. Kurebayashi trained his men to fight a prolonged defensive battle designed to inflict maximum casualties on the invading U.S. forces. Some composition of the Japanese forces. There were Imperial Japanese Army units. The core of the defensive consisted of the 109th Division, reinforced with specialized units trained for underground and guerrilla-style warfare. There were some Imperial Japanese Navy personnel, nearly 7,000 Navy troops, including anti-aircraft and coastal defensive units, helped man artillery positions. There were also engineers and artillery crew. These soldiers built and maintained an extensive network of bunkers, tunnels, and hidden artillery positions that allowed them to resist U.S. forces for over a month. A little bit on their training and mindset as well. The troops were trained for attritional warfare, instructed to fight from fortified positions rather than engaging in direct assault. Many were equipped with rifles, machine guns, mortars, and anti-tank weapons. While artillery units operated heavy guns hidden in caves, the Japanese were ordered to fight to the death, as surrender was considered dishonorable. Only 216 Japanese soldiers survived the battle, with the rest either killed in combat or committing suicide. One of the defining features of the Japanese defense on Iwo Jima was its extensive underground fortifications, which included a vast network of tunnels, bunkers, and hidden artillery positions. As I had already talked about, this system allowed the 22,000 Japanese defenders to withstand intense U.S. bombardment and fight a prolonged battle. To go in depth on those tunnel networks and other fortifications, the tunnels connected command centers, barracks, supplies, depots, and firing positions. Some tunnels as deep as 75 feet underground, protecting troops from U.S. naval and aerial bombardment. These tunnels allowed troops to move undetected between battle positions. The bunkers and pillboxes, there was over 800 reinforced bunkers and pillboxes that were built into Mount Suribachi and the island ridges. The pillboxes and bunkers being made of reinforced concrete, these bunkers could withstand direct bomb hits. Many had machine guns, flamethrowers, and anti-tank weapons positioned to create overlapping fields of fire. The Japanese would also use a tactic called fire and then disappear before being targeted by U.S. troops. The effectiveness of the underground defenses were the tunnel systems made air and naval bombardment almost useless, as troops could retreat and re-emerge after attacks. The Marines had to clear each bunker individually, often facing booby traps and fierce counterattacks. The battle lasted over 36 days, with heavy U.S. casualties, over 26,000 killed or wounded. A personal account from Lieutenant General Tadamichi, and the letter that he sent to his wife said, "Do not expect my return. I will fight to the last man," showing his determination to defend the island of Iwo Jima. This slide will go over the U.S. invasion plan. Operation Detachment, the goal of this operation was to capture Iwo Jima's airfields. Operation Detachment. This was the code name for the U.S. invasion of Iwo Jima, launched on February 19th, 1945. The primary objective was to capture the airfields, which were crucial for supporting strategic bombing campaign against Japan. The key goals of this operation were seizing Iwo Jima's airfields. Iwo Jima had 3 airfields, 1 completed, 2 under construction. These airfields were used by Japanese fighter planes to intercept U.S. B-29 bombers en route to Japan. Capturing them would allow the U.S. to use Iwo Jima as base for escort fighters and emergency landing site for bombers returning from raid. Overtaking Iwo Jima would also be eliminating the Japanese defensive threat. The Japanese aircraft from Iwo Jima often harassed the B-29 superfortresses bombing Japan. By taking the island, the U.S. could neutralize this threat and provide safer flight paths for bombers. Preparing for the invasion of Japan, Iwo Jima was seen as a stepping stone for the planned invasion of mainland Japan, Operation Downfall. The island's location, roughly 750 miles south of Tokyo, made it a valuable staging area. The outcome and significance: the battle lasted 36 days, longer than expected, due to Japan's deep defensive fortifications. March 16th, 1945, the U.S. forces secure. There was 70,000 U.S. Marines from the 3rd, over 4,200 B-29 bombers used during Operation Detachment as an emergency landing site, saving thousands of airmen from the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions, making the Battle of Iwo Jima one of the largest amphibious assaults in Marine Corps history. The composition of U.S. forces: the 3rd Marine Division acted as the reserves force during the initial landing, but was later committed to the fight. Assisted in clearing northern Iwo Jima, facing some of the most stubborn Japanese resistance. And then there was the 4th Marine Division, which landed on the eastern beaches and fought through heavily fortified areas, including the Meat Grinder, Hill 382, Turkey Knob, and the Amphitheater. They suffered several casualties while taking heavily defended positions. The 5th Marine Division landed on the western beaches, tasked with capturing Mount Suribachi, achieving this on February 23, 1945, when the famous flag raising occurred. They later joined in clearing the central and northern parts of the island. Some other supporting forces: the 147th Infantry Regiment, from the U.S. Army, assisted in mop-up operations. The naval and air support, over 500 ships, including battleships, destroyers, and aircraft carriers, provided bombardment and air cover. Casualties and impacts: 26,000 U.S. casualties, 6,800 killed, and 19,000 wounded, making it one of the deadliest battles in Marine Corps history. The Marines secured Iwo Jima after 36 days fighting, capturing only 216 Japanese survivors from the original 22,000 defenders. The amphibious landing at Iwo Jima on February 19th, 1945, was a major component of the Operation Detachment and one of the most complex and deadly amphibious assaults of World War II. The strategy was designed to overwhelm Japanese defenses and establish a beachhead quickly, but the Japanese, entrenched in hidden and fortified positions, were ready. Some of the key elements of the amphibious landing strategy were heavy bombardment to weaken Japanese defenses. Over 8 square miles of the island were targeted, though the Japanese tunnel systems largely protected defenders from destruction. The initial assault waves on the morning of February 19, 30,000 Marines from the 4th and 5th Marine Divisions landed on the southeastern beaches of Iwo Jima. The beach consisted of loose volcanic ash, which made movement difficult and provided little cover for advancing troops. Use of amphibious vehicles. Amphibious tractors carried Marines from landing ships to shore. These vehicles were essential for crossing the ash-laden beaches, but often became bogged down or targeted by hidden Japanese defenses. Staggered waves and reinforcements. The reinforcements, including the 3rd Marine Division, were brought in over several days. Objectives included seizing Mount Suribachi, south, and the airfield's central and northern parts of the island. Japanese defensive response. Unlike earlier battles, the Japanese did not fire during the initial landing. Once the beaches were crowded, hidden bunkers, artillery, and machine guns opened fire, creating devastating kill zones. Iwo Jima's D-Day, February 19th, 1945. The United States launched the massive naval and aerial bombardment on Iwo Jima. The bombardment was intended to weaken Japanese defenses, destroy fortifications, and clear the way for the landing of the 70,000 Marines. Some of the key facts about the bombardment. The duration and forces involved. There was a pre-invasion bombardment, which lasted 3 days, from February 16th to February 18th. The attack involved over 500 ships, including 8 battleships, 12 cruisers, destroyers, and aircraft carriers. U.S. Navy and Army Air Force dropped thousands of tons of bombs and shells on the island. Some of the tactics and targets included battleships and cruisers, targeted known Japanese positions on Mount Suribachi, airfields and northern strongholds. Aircraft from U.S. carriers conducted continuous bombing and strafing runs to suppress enemy anti-aircraft positions. However, the Japanese had constructed an extensive system of defenses which shielded most of their forces from the full effect of the bombardment. The effectiveness, despite the intensity, the bombardment had limited impact on Japanese defenses. The Japanese positions were so deeply fortified and camouflaged that most artillery and bombs failed to destroy critical targets. When Marines landed, they faced heavily intact defenses and coordinated fire, leading to high casualties. The beaches and terrain. The landing beaches were composed of coarse black volcanic ash, which made movement extremely difficult. Unlike sand, the ash offered no solid footing. Marines sank ankle deep and vehicles bogged down quickly. The beaches rose gradually into terraced ridges, giving Japanese defenders elevated fields of fire. The initial landing and the units involved. The assault began at 8:59 a.m. with amphibious tractors delivering the Marines under heavy naval and aerial cover. The 5th Marine Division landed on the left western sector closer to the Mount Suribachi. The 4th Marine Division landed on the right, the eastern sector, facing some of the fiercest resistance. 3rd Marine Division was held in reserve and committed shortly after to reinforce the assault. Some of the first-hand accounts. Marines described the terrain as a nightmare landscape, where the ground swallowed your boots and the air was filled with shrapnel and fire. One Marine recalled, "You couldn't dig a foxhole, you just scooped ash and it caved in on you. We were sitting ducks." On the first day alone, the U.S. suffered over 2,400 casualties. Despite these losses, Marines pushed inland and by February 23rd, raised the American flag atop Mount Suribachi, a symbol of the intense struggle. One of the most shocking elements of the Battle of Iwo Jima was the initial lack of resistance when the U.S. Marines landed on the beaches. Contrary to previous Pacific Island battles, where Japanese defenders attacked immediately during landing, the Japanese commander at Iwo Jima implemented a radically different strategy: let the Americans land unopposed, then trap them. This Japanese strategy consisted of no immediate fire. When the Marines first landed, they were surprised by the lack of enemy fire. Many believed the pre-landing bombardment had wiped out defenses. Kuribashi's tactics: he ordered his men to hold fire until the beaches were jammed with troops, vehicles, and equipment. Then Japanese forces unleashed a devastating ambush from concealed positions. The resulting chaos, once fire began, it came from camouflage bunkers, pillboxes, and hidden artillery. In the hills and Mount Suribachi, the terrain funneled U.S. troops into kill zones, and the open, soft volcanic ash offered no cover. The impact of this delayed attack caused the U.S. Marines to be caught in the open, suffering heavy casualties, over 2,400 on the first day. The Japanese used interlocking fields of fire with mortars, machine guns, and snipers, causing confusion and deadly bottlenecks. One Marine described the moment of the ambush as so. It was as if the whole island came alive with fire. We had no idea where it was coming from. 1 minute it was quiet, and the next we were being torn apart. The first days of battle, there was brutal fights at the beaches and slow movement inland due to the volcanic ash and the heavily fortified positions. Progress off the beaches was measured in yards, not miles. Japanese resistance was deliberate and organized, firing from hidden bunkers and retreating through tunnels to reappear elsewhere. Marines had to clear every pillbox and cave by hand, often using flamethrowers, grenades, and demolition charges in close combat. The advance inland was so slow that by the end of the day, one of the Marines had only secured a 700 to 1,000 yard deep beachhead, despite landing over 30,000 troops. The fight was described by a war of inches and resulted in one of the highest casualty rates in Marine Corps history. The brutal fighting at the beaches of Iwo Jima, combined with the slow advance inland, were the result of infamous battles in the Pacific. Tenacious Japanese defenses, deadly terrain, and the limitations of naval and aerial bombardment. The Marines fought inch by inch in one of the most grueling, costly battles of the war. And on to the challenges of Mount Suribachi. This mountain was a 556-foot dormant volcano located at the southern tip of Iwo Jima. This was one of the most strategically important and fiercely defended positions during the Battle of Iwo Jima. Its height and location gave Japanese a commanding view of the entire southern half of the island and the landing beaches, making it a top priority for the U.S. Marines to capture early in the battle. Mount Suribachi was so important because the geographical advantage was rising sharply from the surrounding terrain. Suribachi allowed Japanese observers and artillery spotters to direct deadly fire onto the troops landing. It overlooked the green, red, and yellow beaches where most of the Marines came ashore. The mountain was honeycombed with tunnels, caves, and concrete bunkers, forming a near impenetrable fortress on the mountain. Japanese troops used interconnected positions to move unseen between these positions on the mountain. The fight for the mountain specifically, the 5th Marine Division's 28th Regiment was assigned to isolate and capture Suribachi. The Marines would successfully cut off the mountain from the rest of the island, encircling it. Over the next several days, Marines advanced yard by yard, clearing tunnels and caves with grenades, flamethrowers, and demolitions. After 4 days of brutal fighting and patrol, the Marines reached the summit on February 23rd and raised a small American flag. Later that day, a second larger flag was raised, captured in the iconic photograph by Joe Rosenthal. Though symbolic, the Battle of Suribachi was not yet over. Japanese troops continued resisting from hidden positions within the mountain for days. The terrain on the mountain was not only steep, rugged, and covered in volcanic ash, but it was also very difficult, making footing and movement difficult. As well as the underground defenses the Japanese had built, allowed the soldiers to reappear behind the U.S. lines, which made the Marines have to go back and clear the areas multiple times. On this slide, I'm going to be going over the cost of victory. All right, and then the 36 days of continuous fighting. The Battle of Iwo Jima was one of the most intense and grueling campaigns in the Pacific theater of World War II, spanning 36 days. The battle was characterized by relentless combat and significant casualties on both sides. Both the American and the Japanese, knowing how strategically important this island was, the Japanese fortified themselves with complex and in-depth defenses, tunnels, bunkers, and pillboxes. And the U.S. wanted the island specifically for the airfields, allowing for easier access to bombing Japan. The capture of Iwo Jima provided the U.S. with a critical base for air operations, contributing to the eventual Allied victory in the Pacific. The high casualty rate for this battle specifically was largely due to the formidable Japanese defenses, Under the command of General Tadamichi, Japanese forces had fortified themselves with an extensive network of bunkers, tunnels, and hidden artillery positions. These defenses tore apart the U.S., mainly at the landing on Iwo Jima. Despite the heavy losses, the capture of Iwo Jima provided a strategic advantage and a huge morale boost for the U.S. Army. The immense sacrifice and bravery displayed during this specific battle commemorated and memorialized and continues to be a significant part of the U.S. military history. The near total loss of the Japanese garrison underscores the ferocity of the battle and the defenders' commitment to their case. This steadfast resistance contributed to the high casualty rates and the prolonged nature of the conflict. Heroes of Iwo Jima, there was 27 Medals of Honor awarded, most of any battle in World War II. 22 of the Medals of Honor given were given to U.S. Marines, 5 were U.S. Navy sailors, including 4 hospital corpsmen attached to the Marine units. Of these 27 awards, 14 were posthumous, reflecting the extreme risks undertaken by these individuals. The recipients' actions included single-handedly neutralizing enemy positions, rescuing wounded comrades under fire, and sacrificing their lives to protect fellow service members. Some notable recipients were Herschel Williams, a Marine flamethrower operator who destroyed multiple Japanese pillboxes under heavy fire. He was the last surviving Medal of Honor recipient from Iwo Jima until his death in 2022. Another one being Donald J. Rahul, a Marine who threw himself onto a grenade to save his fellow Marines, sacrificing his life in the process. The valor demonstrated by these individuals was instrumental in the U.S. forces' ability to capture the heavily fortified island despite facing fierce resistance from entrenched Japanese defenders. Gunnery Sergeant John Basilone was one of the most celebrated U.S. Marines of World War II, known for his extraordinary heroism in both the Pacific campaigns of Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima. His heroism in Guadalcanal, during the Battle of Guadalcanal, Basilone commanded 2 machine gun sections defending a critical position against a fierce Japanese assault. Over 2 days and nights of relentless fighting, he held his ground despite being vastly outnumbered, repaired and manned weapons under fire, even after many of his men were killed or wounded. He would run through hostile territory to retrieve ammunition, ensuring his guns could continue firing. His actions were credited with stopping the Japanese advance and saving many American lives. For this, he received the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. He would then return to combat on Iwo Jima. After receiving his Medal of Honor, Basilone returned to the U.S. and was offered a commission and a safe assignment stateside. Instead, he insisted on returning to combat, eventually deploying to Iwo Jima with the 5th Marine Division on February 19, 1945. During the assault on Iwo Jima, he single-handedly destroyed a Japanese blockhouse using grenades and demolitions. Then he guided a tank through a minefield and under heavily enemy fire. While moving to rejoin his unit, he was struck and killed by mortar fire. For his actions in Iwo Jima, he was posthumously rewarded the Navy Cross, the second highest military decoration of valor. Basilone's legacy is he was the only enlisted Marine in World War II to receive both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. He is memorialized with statues and streets and naval ships bearing his name. His story was featured prominently in HBO's The Pacific miniseries. Now, Jacqueline H. Lucas, the youngest Medal of Honor recipient at 17. He was born on February 14, 1928 in Plymouth, North Carolina. Lucas was determined to serve his country following the attack on Pearl Harbor. At just 14 years old, he forged his mother's signature and bribed a notary to enlist in the U.S. Marine Corps, falsely claiming he was 17 due to his robust physique and successfully completed basic training and was assigned to non-combat duties in Hawaii. Eager to see combat, Lucas stowed away on the USS Deol and transport ship heading to Iwo Jima. Upon discovery, instead of facing punishment, he was assigned to a rifle company in the 5th Marine Division. His heroism at Iwo Jima on February 20th, 1945, during the Battle of Iwo Jima, Lucas and 3 fellow Marines were advancing through a ravine when they were ambushed by Japanese forces. 2 grenades landed among them. Without hesitation, Lucas threw himself onto one grenade and pulled the other beneath him, absorbing the blasts to protect his comrades. Miraculously, he survived the explosions but sustained severe injuries. After extensive medical treatment, including 21 surgeries, he recovered though over 200 pieces of shrapnel remained in his body for the rest of his life. His Medal of Honor legacy: at the age of 17, he was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Harry S. Truman on October 5, 1945. He remains the youngest Marine and the youngest serviceman in World War II to receive the highest military decoration. After the war, Lucas would continue to serve his country by joining the U.S. Army in 1961, where he trained as a paratrooper. He survived a training jump in which both parachutes failed, further cementing his reputation for resilience. Lucas passed away on June 5, 2008, at the age of 80. In honor of his service, the U.S. Navy commissioned the USS Jack H. Lucas, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, in 2023. The impact on the Pacific War. The U.S. now had an airfield close to Japan, which would allow it to do bombing runs on Japan and use for emergency landings for other aircraft. Having the complete control over Iwo Jima during the Second World War would eventually save hundreds of airmen. The availability of Iwo Jima's airfields for emergency landings would significantly increase survival rates of the B-29 air crews. Estimates suggest that the lives of over 24,000 U.S. airmen were saved due to the island's strategic use in this capacity. The legacy of utilizing Iwo Jima as an emergency landing site underscores the island's strategic value beyond its initial capture. The sacrifices made during the battle contribute to the success of air campaigns against Japan and the eventual Allied victory in the Pacific. Foreshadowing the Battle of Okinawa. The intensity of Iwo Jima foreshadowed the horrors of the Battle of Okinawa, which began on April 1st, 1945. Spanning 82 days, Okinawa became the largest amphibious assault in the Pacific theater and resulted in over 12,000 American deaths and approximately 100,000 Japanese military fatalities. The battle also witnessed extensive kamikaze attacks, causing significant losses to the U.S. Navy. The ferocity of Okinawa reinforced fears about the potential cost of invading mainland Japan. Admiral Raymond Spruance described Okinawa as a bloody, hellish prelude to the invasion of Japan, emphasizing the anticipated challenges of a mainland assault. The experiences of Iwo Jima and Okinawa heavily influenced U.S. strategic decisions, including the use of atomic weapons to avoid a protracted and costly invasion. The legacy of Iwo Jima. The island would eventually return to Japan in 1968. After the Battle of Iwo Jima, the island would remain under U.S. control for more than 2 decades. The island had been a key strategic location during the war, but after hostilities ended, its significance diminished. It continued to be used by the U.S. military for training and other purposes during the post-war occupation of Japan and into the Cold War. The island on June 26, 1968, was returned to Japan as a part of a broader process of reestablishing full Japanese control over territories occupied by the U.S. during the war. This transfer was conducted peacefully and symbolized a continued strengthening of U.S.-Japan relations in the post-war era. While returned to Japan, the island still maintained limited military access, and it's administered by the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force. The island, now officially known as Loto, is uninhabited except for a small contingent of Japanese military personnel and support staff. The annual U.S.-Japan Reunion of Honor ceremony on Iwo Jima, now officially called Loto, serves as a tribute to the soldiers from both nations who fought and died during the 1945 battle. Established in 1986 on the 40th anniversary of the conflict, this joint memorial has become a symbol of reconciliation and enduring friendship between former adversaries. Honoring sacrifice and forging peace, held each March near the invasion beaches Mount Suribachi, the ceremony brings together U.S. Marines, members of Japan's Self-Defense Force, veterans, bereaved families, and dignitaries. The event features solemn rituals such as wreath laying and shared water ceremony. Musical performances by both nations' military bands. These acts honor the memory of the more than 26,000 service members who perished during the battle. While the number of surviving World War II veterans diminishes, the Reunion of Honor continues to be a vital link between past and present. In recent years, the ceremony has included younger generations, military personnel, and descendants of those who fought, ensuring that the legacy of sacrifice and the lesson of history endure. The island remains a restricted military site, accessible primarily for these memorial events. Its hallowed ground serve as a powerful reminder of the cost of war and the value of reconciliation. The U.S. Marine Corps War Memorial, also known as the Iwo Jima Memorial, is located in Arlington, Virginia, near the Arlington National Cemetery. It is one of the most iconic military monuments in the United States, honoring all U.S. Marines who have died in service since the founding of the Corps in 1775. The Japanese perspective. General Tadamichi, the Japanese commander during the Battle of Iwo Jima, is widely regarded for his strategic brilliance, unorthodox tactics, and determined leadership. His decision turned Iwo Jima into one of the bloodiest and most grueling battles of World War II for U.S. forces. His leadership strategy, Kurabayashi, who had previously served as a military attaché in the U.S., understood American military strength and resolved to make the invasion of Iwo Jima as costly as possible, unlike typical Japanese defense tactics. He ordered his troops to avoid banzai charges, which had proven ineffective in early battles, constructed the vast underground networks and the hidden concrete bunkers and pillars. His defensive plan significantly extended the duration of the battle and would also increase the number of casualties throughout the battle. Despite being cut off and surrounded, Kurabayashi continued to command and fight with his troops in the final days of March 1945 as U.S. forces closed in. He reportedly led a final surprise nighttime attack against American positions in the northern part of the island. Though details of his death remain uncertain, his body was never conclusively identified. It is widely believed that Kurabayashi died fighting, possibly in hand-to-hand combat, alongside his remaining troops. He is thought to have refused to commit ritual suicide, choosing instead to lead from the front until the end. The role of war correspondence. Joe Rosenthal's photograph raising the flag on Iwo Jima, taken on the 23rd of February, is one of the most iconic and reproduced images in American history. It shows 6 U.S. Marines raising the American flag atop Mount Suribachi during the Battle of Iwo Jima, symbolizing triumph, sacrifice, and unity during World War II. The moment captured. Rosenthal and an Associated Press photographer captured the image during the second flag raising in Suribachi. A large flag was hoisted to replace the first one, which was too small to be seen by troops across the island. The image captured 6 Marines working together to raise the flag under the harsh combat conditions. A spontaneous, unposed moment that visually conveyed the determination of American forces. Though there was some early speculation the photo was staged, Rosenthal and later investigations confirmed it was entirely authentic. Immediate sensation, the photograph was published in newspapers across the U.S. within 48 hours. It became an instant morale booster for the American public. The initial coverage in the papers on February 19, 1945, the U.S. newspapers and radio broadcasts reported that Marines had landed on Iwo Jima, describing the invasion as a critical step toward Japan. Reports emphasized the fierce Japanese resistance, the difficult terrain, and the intensity of the combat, but also formed it as a necessary and just part of the island-hopping campaign. The battle was portrayed as heroic but costly. Many stories focused on individual acts of valor and sacrifice. Casualty figures were initially downplayed to maintain morale, though by the end of the campaign, the public was informed of the 6,821 U.S. deaths and over 19,000 wounded. War correspondents like Ernie Pale, who would die a few weeks later in Okinawa, brought emotional depth to coverage by sharing first-hand experiences from the front lines. The effects on veterans from the battle. The psychological impact of the Battle of Iwo Jima on American service members was profound. The brutal 36-day campaign, marked by relentless close-quarters combat, heavy casualties, and near-total destruction of the enemy, left many veterans with long-term emotional scars, including PTSD and survivor's guilt. Although the term PTSD was not formally recognized until decades later, many Marines and Navy personnel who fought in Iwo Jima experienced flashbacks and nightmares of the violence they witnessed. Emotional numbness or detached from loved ones, hypervigilance and anxiety, especially in crowded and loud areas, difficulty adjusting to civilian life, with some turning to alcohol or isolation to cope. The intensity of combat on Iwo Jima, constant shelling, booby traps, and the sight of close friends killed created a psychological burden that many carried for the rest of their lives. Survivor's guilt. Many veterans struggled with this, asking, why did I survive when so many others didn't? And could I have done more to save one of their buddies? This guilt was especially strong among those who witnessed the deaths of friends or narrowly escaped death themselves. Some felt unworthy of public praise or medals and avoided talking about their experiences for years, if ever. Modern military lessons. Some of the key strategic and tactical lessons were amphibious assault operations. Iwo Jima demonstrated the complexity of launching large-scale amphibious landings. Coordinating between the Navy, Marine Corps, and Army Air Force was essential, emphasizing the importance of joint operations. Air superiority and the strategic necessity of it. Control of the skies was essential for both offense and defense in the Pacific campaign. Air superiority allowed the U.S. to protect naval and ground forces, support ground operations, and launch bombing raids on Japan. Iwo Jima's strategic location, roughly halfway between Mariana Islands and Japan, made it an ideal base for fighters. The pop culture and Iwo Jima. The Letters from Iwo Jima, filmed in 2006, directed by Clint Eastwood, serves as a companion film to Flags of Our Fathers, but from the Japanese perspective, while Flags focused on the American flag raise and the legacy of a single photograph. Letters dives deep into the human side of the Japanese soldiers who fought and died on the island, as well as the book Iwo Jima, the dramatic account of the epic battle that turned the tide of World War II. Was originally published in 1965, focuses primarily on providing a detailed ground-level narrative of the Battle of Iwo Jima, though the first-hand experience of the men who fought it. The main focus of the book focused on first-hand testimonies, the human cost, tactical and strategical context, Japanese defense and perspective, tone and style, legacy and influence. This book was one of the major attempts to document the personal side of Iwo Jima long before oral history became a widely accepted method. And there's some closing thoughts. The Battle of Iwo Jima was fought from February 19 to March 26, 1945. This was one of the most pivotal and costly battles of World War II, though fought on a small volcanic island only 8 square miles in size. Its military, symbolic, and historical importance was immense. The strategical value was very important, the location being so close to Tokyo and Japan, as well as having airfields. The psychological and symbolic impact was also immense, as well as the human cost and the military legacy. The Battle of Iwo Jima stands as one of the most important testaments to the sacrifice and heroism of those who serve in war. For 36 days in early 1945, tens of thousands of U.S. Marines, Navy corpsmen, and Japanese defenders engaged in a brutal struggle over a small volcanic island where every inch of ground came at staggering human cost. The sacrifice was intense. Over 26,000 American casualties, including 6,800 dead, and the near total loss of the island's 22,000 Japanese defenders, many of who chose death over surrender. History remembers and will always remember Iwo Jima as more than just a battle. It is a lasting symbol of what war demands, what it reveals about those who fight, and what nations must learn in its aftermath. It stands as a tribute to courage, a reminder of loss, and a call to never forget. And I have this quote from the Iwo Jima Memorial that states, "When you go home, tell them of us and say, 'For your tomorrow, we gave you our today.'"